And now our host, Stephen Lee Morris.
This week, we're joined by the artistic director of Open Fist Theatre, Martha Demson, who's been working with a team of advocates to promote Senate Bill 805, otherwise known as the Save the Performing Arts Bill. Martha's here to explain what the bill is, what it means, and how it works in tandem with other bills that are also in the works, and one federal bill that has been passed. Martha Demson, welcome to Animal Farm.
Good name, thank you.
Martha is with us to get into the weeds somewhat of some legislation. She has been working with Vanessa Stewart and Beatrice Casagran on California Senate Bill 805, which is otherwise known as the Save the Performing Arts Bill. That now has passed the Senate and has passed, I should say, the Labor Committee in the Senate and is being moved now to appropriations, where it faces yet more challenges before possibly being sent to the Assembly. And all those steps have to be done before it becomes actual law. SB 805 is one of a trio of bills that are working sort of in partnership somewhat, and Martha can explain that in more detail, on how to serve arts organizations as the sector emerges from the coronavirus. The first of this trio really stems from the $900 billion coronavirus relief package that was passed by those funds are available. That was passed by the federal government. One of the offshoots of that is a federal initiative called the Save Our Stages proposal, which has to do with giving funds for shuttered venues to reopen. That's on the federal level. Then there are two related state bills that are still have gone through Senate process, but have not yet reached the House. And one of those is the one that Martha really spearheaded, and that's Senate Bill 805, which we'll start with. And a related piece of legislation is called Senate Bill 628, which is sponsored by the Californians for the Arts. So let's start with SB 805. What does it do in short, and where is it at, and what are the challenges? And then we'll back and open the curtain, as it were, into the larger perspective of the funding that's available.
That's great. Not maybe in 20 words or less. So before I start with that, I think I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that in addition to the efforts of Beatrice Casagran and Vanessa Stewart, we have a few other people who have been really critical in forwarding this legislation. One is Emmanuel Deliage of Casa 0101, Mark Antonio Pritchett from Sacred Fools, Alina DeSantos from Rogue Machine. All of these have played really a very crucial part in the forwarding of the bill, each with sort of their own portfolio of activity. So I won't get into that. Let's talk about the bill itself. So this bill is designed to really support the artists and art workers who have been sidelined by the pandemic. It is designed to help small organizations, small performing arts organizations in California meet minimum wage. And for anyone who knows the history of the small performing arts scene in California, it has historically been underfunded and certainly does not have the administrative or financial bandwidth to meet minimum wage. So this legislation does two things. Not only does it help those arts workers, but it also really helps stabilize these vital small performing arts organizations by allowing significant matching dollars to come in to help them pay hourly minimum wage to everyone who works with them. The way that it works is a paymaster is established, a nonprofit paymaster. So all of the work for payroll, compliance, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, all of that stuff gets handled by the paymaster. They become the employer of record for just that section of the business, and organizations will contribute up to 25% of their adjusted gross revenue into this fund, and those funds then get matched on a very generous tiering system, with the most going to the bottom, and then it sort of graduates less and less matching as the organizations grow larger.
So it's 25% of their annual budget, and yet it's a minimum wage requirement. What if the 25% of the budget does not meet a minimum wage requirement? Is it still legal?
Right. So this is illegal, but this is where the fund comes in. So let's say I'm a $200,000 organization. I'm going to, over the course of the year, my responsibility, if I want to tap the maximum that I can, I'll be putting in up to 50% of my, up to 25%. So $50,000 of my annual budget will go into this fund, but that will then be matched 4-to-1. So for every dollar I put in, the matching fund will contribute 4. So this will mean that my hiring power is actually $250,000 in a year. Now that sounds like a huge amount of money, but it doesn't go that far when you're looking at creating a dance concert or a play, or even putting on a big chorale show. These projects are labor intensive and they involve a lot of collaborators, not just the performers, but the designers, the stage managers, the carpenters, the seamstresses, and so forth. But we believe that with this matching program, organizations will be able to sustain their missions. They will now be able to hire artists and arts workers who traditionally they may have paid small stipends to. Now they will be able to pay them an hourly minimum wage and continue the work serving their communities according to their missions.
Is there a difference in this legislation and the way these funds are to be dispersed? Is there a difference or a priority towards, say, community theaters versus small professional theaters versus for-profit companies, such as, say, the Pantages or the Complex, which are both for-profit organizations?
Right. I will leave the Pantages out of it because this program sunsets at $1.4 million. So above that budget level, no organization would be eligible. But this fund is set up just for nonprofit organizations. It's not designed. There are a number of other programs that are coming in Senate Bill 628 that will help and benefit also our small for-profit sector, which certainly also needs support. But in the creation of these jobs, this is exclusively for nonprofit theaters. The paymaster, by the way, the nonprofit paymaster that will be created, or the two that will be created, hopefully one for Southern California and one for Northern California, this service will be available to all nonprofit arts organizations, regardless of size. There should be a considerable benefit to aggregating all of our payroll, just the way that like entertainment partners will do it in the motion picture business. You're hired on a particular shoot, but then they manage the payroll side. This allows, especially for workers' comp and for unemployment insurance, this ensures that an organization isn't hit with rising costs as claims are filed. And invariably, there will be unemployment claims filed because our work tends to be cyclical and people will go from show to show and job to job. So there will be periods of unemployment, and that will be important to help sustain those individuals in between shows too.
Very good. It is now going to appropriations, and that by definition, the very word appropriations makes the hair on my neck stand up.
They call it propes or appropes. It's interesting. I'm like, what is that? It makes it feel a little bit better than appropriations. Yeah.
Do you see this as smooth sailing, or what are the short? What are some of the big challenges of getting it through this?
When we were presenting to labor, we really needed to show how we were working hard to serve the goals and the needs of labor in California, and the stories of the impact of these organizations in communities was important, personal stories. And but now I think we have to start looking a little bit more at cost benefit analysis in the Appropriations Committee. I think it's still very important to talk about the outsized impact that our organizations have, where for every dollar spent on a ticket, there are other dollars spent in the community on parking and babysitters and restaurants and drinks and all of the things that go along with an outing to the theater or to the dance or to the concert. So what we want to show as clearly as we can is the number of organizations in California that will be eligible for this help. We know it's we know it's above 1,200 organizations. We're still looking at some organizations. Cause IQ identifies 1,972 small performing arts organizations in California of the budget size that we're talking about, under 1.4 million. We think some of those organizations may not actually be performing arts organizations. So we're looking to get the exact figure there. Then we're looking to see, based on their budget size, what kind of matching they would be eligible for to determine the real cost of the program. But then what we get to show are the number of jobs that we estimate will be created and the amount of economic stimulus that will go into those local communities and what benefits will accrue from that. And also, as these organizations grow, which they will do with this kind of investment, what that in turn will begin to generate in terms of taxes and yet more economic activity and yet more jobs.
So you're advocating for a kind of trickle-up theory for the arts,
Trickle-up theory,
as opposed to a trickle-down theory, which proved that
the whole funding mechanism has, it's always been the biggest organizations get the most, and often by the time you get to the bottom, there's little access to funding. In this day where we really are paying attention to racial equity, I mean, arts and entertainment in the state of California are huge, but they have historically been very white. And I think that our organizations are uniquely well positioned, as we are in communities all across the state, to begin to bring those underserved communities of artists and arts workers really into the pipeline, really advance their careers or advance their work in communities, depending on what the mission is, in a way that is equitable.
Final question before we move on to SB 628, which is the other piece of legislation. Is there a timeline on this? In a way, could this funding run out? And then we're back. You've made this huge investment. You've given this kind of shot of steroids into the entire arts sector, and suddenly a new administration comes in, a new economic climate, and it all just goes away.
Right. Well, of course, this is that kind of jeopardy always exists with any kind of public funding. Yeah. Everything is always going to be renewed every year, and so you're going to have to make that case. My hope is, we are still looking to identify. The bill talks about upon appropriation, so the budget source is still being determined. Is it going to come from the $26 billion of federal funds that are coming into the state for arts relief? Certainly, this would qualify because our buildings have been shuttered and our artists have been unemployed. Or do we want to go to the to the general budget, the general fund, which also has had a surplus? So and that might be a more easily renewable source of funding, because of course the danger once you build this is if you take that funding away, then the organizations are in possibly far greater jeopardy than they are today. Although that's hard to imagine because so many arts organizations are facing the likelihood of not reopening if there is not some kind of relief, because the combination of COVID, the capacity limits on performances, and the additional cost for COVID, plus now needing to meet the new employment laws that came into effect in January of 2020 under AB 5, there is no way to sustain these organizations. So we do feel like the urgency is now. So the priority is to get that funding. Ideally, we will get multi-year funding to start this as a pilot to prove the concept. And then my hope also is to expand into the private sector and to approach foundations to partner as well, so we can have a true public-private nonprofit partnership. I think that would be the most sort of progressive path for us, because the arts has been historically underfunded in California. I think 73 cents per resident is allocated to the arts, as opposed to over $7 a person in New York and over 12, I think, in Minnesota. So I think as an arts and entertainment capital, we think there's so much money here, but really arts funding is very, very low. We're quite low nationally. So I think to improve that is going to improve not only that arts incubator pipeline, but I think it will help sustain the entire arts entertainment community and actually lead to some remarkable growth and development.
I'm going to ask you about the other bill that's on a parallel track, with the caveat that you did not work on this bill. So it's a little unfair, but at the same time, you are an observer and you have a bird's eye view on this legislation. This bill is Senate Bill 628. It was advocated for by the Californians for the California for the Arts. It's called the California for the Arts bill, in fact, and it also made, as I mentioned before, it made its way through the Labor Committee, and I think a week prior to SB 805. This is
Correct.
And so it's in much the same position. How does this Senate Bill 628 potentially partner with Senate Bill 805?
That's a great question. So the author of SB 628 is Senator Ben Allen, who is also co-author on our bill. So the staffs of both senators have been working closely together, looking at both of these as sort of the budget bills that go along with the arts, the funding bills for the arts. And I think there are 4 buckets in this $1 billion ask, which is a relief ask. $250,000 is for museums and cultural institutions, finding and preserving some of California's indigenous landmarks, and $250,000 to expand access to the arts through the California Arts Council in the form of grants, $250,000 for workforce development and infrastructure, which is about putting artists back to work. And this is where there may be some overlap with our bill. And then, why am I forgetting the last one? There's more relief funding for, to help organizations reopen where there are holes. This grant could step in to help those up, and also for profit, by the way. So this is where some of those organizations that manage venues for profit but have seen their revenues plummet to zero could actually find some relief. And also in the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, that federal program that you mentioned at the beginning. So I think what both of these bills do is they begin to call attention to how very important the performing arts and the small performing arts sector is to California, to our local economies, but also to sort of our social economy. I think that what the arts provides in communities goes beyond the things that you can show statistically, drops in crime, improved economics,
right.
to more intangible things, a sense of well-being, a sense of community, a sense of empathy, a sense of optimism. All of these things are really increased. And I think we have felt the impact of life without over the last 14, 16 months. And so I think everyone recognizes now in the legislature, because of these 2 parallel bills, how serious the plight is for the performing arts workers and the performing arts institutions. And I think everyone does have an appetite to address this, which is actually very moving, because I feel it's an extraordinary moment. And I really hope that we are all up to the task together of meeting it to provide what could be truly transformational legislation, I think, to finally to invest in such a significant way in the people who make the arts in California. I just think it will have such profound impacts on our, not just on our economy, but on our society.
And to the federal level, the Save Our Stages initiative, which has taken a fraction of the COVID relief bill and channeled that into what? Now, these funds are unlike the two state initiatives, bills, I should say, which are working their way through legislation. This money is passed and it's available. What does it do for the arts?
So this is a huge bucket. This is $16 billion. It's administered in something called the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, SVOG. Mm-hmm. And it goes obviously to those who own or manage venues, but also theater producers are eligible, even if they don't have a permanent venue of their own, but work in different spots. I believe that talent representatives are eligible. So there are a number of other critical sort of categories that are part of the sort of the infrastructure of theater that are being addressed by this grant. It's a very different type of process. It's a very robust application in terms of not only of demonstrating your eligibility, I would say. So they really are looking to see how much money you lost month over month, comparing 2019 to 2020 and 2021, and your eligibility for funding. It's first prioritized for those who have lost 90% or more, have seen revenue decreases of 90% or more. Then the second group that will receive funding are those who can demonstrate that they have lost 70% or more of their earned revenue, total revenue. And then the last tranche is at least they have had revenue losses of at least 25%. And it's looking to make up for those losses by sending up to, I think it's 45% of your total revenue in 2019. So that's a very substantial amount of money and designed to bring movie theater chains out of bankruptcy or from going into bankruptcy. Major performing arts organizations, as well as smaller theaters as well. So they don't discriminate by size, but I think the reason that it needs to be so large is it's a national program. And we're actually looking at some very large chains that are in trouble. I think the maximum grant is, it could be wrong, I think it's $10 million. But all grants will be fairly sizable if awarded. And those funds are available now. Many people have already submitted because it's a first come, first serve, but they look first, the first 2 weeks, they're looking exclusively at those who can demonstrate 90% losses.
Right. Martha Demson, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to see you, Stephen.
Next week, we're joined by Claudia Lavista, co-founder with Victor Manuel Ruiz Becerra of the Delphos Dance Theater in Mexico City.